Not often do I get a chance to do an X restoration for a TV celebrity, but I'm doing an X restoration for a TV celebrity.
Alright, Future Tim here. That was real clickbaity, so let's go ahead and give you a little bit of context. Now, you may have heard of Brooke and Dave Whipple from History channels alone, or from their wildly successful YouTube channels. Well, they've been a part of the Michigan Bushcraft Spring Gathering that I co-founded back in 2018. They've been doing it for a number of years. And of that group, I am the resident axe restoration guy. So that's how they knew of me.
So that brings us to this hatchet. Now, this was Brooke's grandfather's Norlund hatchet. And she asked me to, originally she just asked me to resharpen it. But after discussing it with her and a little bit of encouragement from her husband, Dave, we decided to do some more work and do the whole thing. So what we're looking to do is, one, just clean up this head a little bit. I'm not trying to take all of the patina off. I'm just trying to take the surface rust off. Get this Norlund logo to show up real well again, because it doesn't really show up that great now. This bit is fairly thin, so it won't take much to clean it up, but shine it up a little bit, get a nice keen edge on here. The handle is in good shape, and it's still fairly tight to the head. There's no wiggling or anything right now. It might in the winter time, but not right now. It does have some metal wedges, at least one. I'm not sure if this is wood or metal yet. I do know this one's metal though. So I want to pop these out, remove them, salvage the handle, and just clean this up. So maybe do a real light sanding or something, and give this another coat of oil, clean up the shoulders a little bit, and then get this rehung. Once we've done all of that, I will turn around and make a leather sheath for this, custom fit for this size axe head. I have a pattern already, so I'll do that down in the leather shop. One of the things that I'm going to want to do is make sure that as I'm grinding this head, I'm protecting this patina back in here, because it's really easy to pull this axe head back too far the way I grind them. And I don't want to put any marks on this. And I'm also going to take the handle off first, so I don't accidentally hit the shoulders like this has been done right here. It happens, but I want to not be the one that does it to this. So the next thing to do is get this handle off.
Alright, so Future Tim back here. I'm going to do a little bit of narration over top of this video just to explain what it is that I'm working on. I'm not going to talk the whole time, but whenever there's an important bit that I want you to see, or whenever there's an important bit that I want you to know about, I'm just going to pipe up so you know. Right here, I'm just clamping this in. I'm going to drill out the aluminum wedge just using some wood strips to prevent from marring up the axe head. This here is a flathead screw, like for lathing. That's all it is. So I drilled about a 1/8 inch hole into the top of that aluminum wedge, and then we just drove this screw down there, and I'm going to use a pry bar to knock it out. This is the easiest and best method that I've come across for pulling these little metal wedges out. Gonna repeat the process on the wooden wedges. Fail. Not a fail. So at this part, I ended up using a combination of needle nose pliers and screwdrivers to bang and pry the rest of the wedge out. And then once I had done that, I drove it out with another drift. I should have used one that was more shaped to the head, or used a wooden one because it wouldn't have marred the top of the handle, but it was already cross split anyways, and I was going to clean up the top of it, so it's not too bad. With the handle off, I went to a blue Scotch-Brite pad on the grinding wheel. I'm going to use this to resurface the axe head. I love this refinishing or resurfacing wheel. A quick pass and a light touch is all you need. Once everything was cleaned up, I switched to a 600 grit flap disc. This is a specialty disc. This is to polish the head. Because this flap disc is so fine, it doesn't really dig any more of the patina off of the head. It only shines up the parts that are high. So you can see there, it's still left a lot of that character on the head. After cleaning up all the sides, covered it up in painter's tape, really thick, so that I don't accidentally bump the side of the head on the grinder once I get to reprofiling this axe head. This doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be thick. This first belt is 60 grit. You see I'm knocking the shoulders off. Here's the difference between the first side, after it's been hit with 60 grit, and the original edge. Once I've ground both sides down, I'll begin to alternate back and forth to make sure that the cutting edge is even. And after 60 grit, I went to 120. This is not so much to reprofile anymore, this is just cleaning up the scratch marks from the 60 to make it a clean edge. And after 120 grit, I went to 400. This is knocking that burr off. So something I did off camera was to hit this on a buffing wheel after I was done with the 400 grit. That's how we got it as shiny as it is. Shiny enough you can see my garage and my dumb face in there. Time for the handle. Now this part, I want to share the entire process of cleaning up the shoulders on this. Not because it's very exciting, but because if you're trying to use sharps to shape an axe handle, this is important stuff to see. And I want to show it in its entirety. I don't want to show you the beginning and then jump right to the end, because if you want to try to do this yourself, I would like you to be able to follow along. So I'm taking very, very small bites right now because I do not want to hit the part of the handle that already fits into the axe head. I'm only trying to clean up those shoulders to prevent that curling the next time I refit the handle. And I have some buddies that also use sharps to carve and hang axes, just the same process, and I've watched them just rip away with material, and they're probably better men than I am because I choose to go very, very slow, but I prefer to be a little more methodical about how it all goes together. There's no right way or wrong way. It's just I'm not particularly fast when it comes to doing the final shading like this. I like to take my time. But it also makes it harder to... If you go too fast, it's easy to run out the wood and mess up a good hang. You can see there that I've removed almost all of that material where that shoulder hits the upper part of where the eye of the axe hits. last part is just to hit the part the back of the shoulder where the wood had split off years ago. I'm not trying to do much to reshape it other than just clean it up and make it look a little bit nicer. Super small bites. You can see how little material I'm removing. There we go. It's cleaned up. Drove the handle back in so that we can see whether or not we got the hang correct and cleaned up enough of it. There's a little bit of curling on this side. I think I zoom in. Yeah, there we go. There's just a little bit of curling on this side and slightly more on the other, but that's less than there was, and it's not enough to worry about. This is how I fit a wedge. This is a soft wood wedge. I line it up inside the eye. I'm just going to take a pencil and mark where it hits the other end of the eye. Then pull it out, reverse it, mark the other end. And then once you have your marks, you can draw with a ruler and cut it with a saw, or you can do it with an axe. You can do it with a knife and just split it down. I scored it with a box knife here, and it works just fine. There's no wrong answers. You just need to remove that piece of material. So because this Norlund, the head is so shallow, this wedge is actually significantly too long. And we'll get there in a second. I'll explain it. But right here, I'm just shaping the wedge, cleaning up the leading edges, and then I'm going to clean up the corners and try to get it tidy. So like I said, I actually did this wedge wrong, but I want to show this process because this is the same no matter how I do it, with cleaning them up a little bit. That leading edge where it goes into the wood, I want it to have a nice taper so it holds up. And then I knock the corners off of these just to make it look a little bit cleaner and to help it go into the eye a little bit so you don't have those sharp corners curling up as you hammer it home. Now, when we get to hanging this, I want you to pay special attention to the sound, and I'll stop talking. But as I start to hammer this in, you're going to hear it bottom out in the head. Now, what happened is it's going to bottom it out into the head before the wedge is actually able to spread the top of the haft and close it up around the eye. So here we go. I'm going to start to hammer it. You're going to hear tap, 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 thump. That sound right there. That was it bottoming out inside the handle. And then this is me realizing that I made the wedge too tall. So here I am reworking it. The slot goes about 2/3 of the way down through the handle, which makes it about that deep. Now, I need to remove a bunch of that bottom, and the arbitrary amount that I took off is right there. So then I do the whole process of shortening the wedge, which is exactly the same as before. It's just now the wedge is going to be a little bit thicker.
Nope. You get in the house.
Never mind Dudley, our hound. Trouble getting in the background. So there we go.
Dudley, that is enough. Hey!
So this is going to sound different. You never get that resounding ring. And I pounded it so hard that it split the wedge, which is okay, because we're going to cut that excess off. So I'm going to grab a hammer and continue to drive it home, because I want that as tight as I can. And I don't really care if it mangles it. I've always been one of those guys where I mangle the wedges. They almost always split on me. I never get too excited about it though, because truly handles are a replaceable item on an axe. So I don't ever get too attached to how I make the wedges. There's Dudley, the trouble-getting hound. And with that, it is hung. Super exciting stuff. Sand off the old varnish and get it to a consistent finish. 120, 220, 320 grit sandpapers. My janky old jug of Watco teak oil. I've used it so many times and I've done it so messy that I have to use pliers to get the cap off. I like teak oil because it cures faster than boiled linseed. It's basically just a boiled linseed oil with a solvent in it. I've used boiled linseed oil in the past, but I don't necessarily have days to wait on axes anymore. I'm a little busier in my life than I used to be. So I use teak oil because I can get 4 or 5 coats of teak oil done in the same amount of time that it would take to do 1 or 2 coats of linseed oil. Some nice grain. I spilled it all over my desk, or the workbench, so I guess it makes it easier to re-dip the cloth when it gets wet. You know, you just sop it up off the cutting table. Whatever, it's fine. And here we go. After it's had a little bit of time to cure, I wiped it down and let it set for a day or so. All right, on to the mask. I have all of these pre-made hatchet patterns that I've been working on over the years. This particular 3-inch fits a Norlund. Now, all of the audio, after a certain point of this, I'm going to shut it off because while I was working, we were listening to Legends of Evantris on YouTube, and I don't want to accidentally get caught with a copyright strike, so I am just going to mute it once we start playing that. Sorry, because this is really good for ASMR, so you're just going to have to go without. Or maybe go to my Instagram. If I have these cut into reels, then you can listen to the ASMR there. I am using what's called a head knife. You do not need to use a head knife to do this. A box cutter is probably easier to do this, and I generally use a box cutter. I was just feeling some kind of way that day, probably wanting to show off for the video and to show how good I was with a head knife. So I decided to do it the hard way. Looking back on it, I would have, or maybe my box cutter was out in the garage or something. I couldn't be bothered to go get it. I don't remember. But either way, what I would suggest is just use a box cutter with a brand new blade. It's way sharper, way sharp enough, and it's way easier to use a box knife than a head knife. Now with this head knife, because I'm pushing away from me, pay close attention to where my fingers are. I'm always trying to keep them beside or behind the direction of my push, because if for some reason that head knife were to slip, it's going to go straight away from me, and I want to make sure my fingers are nowhere near that edge. That thing is so sharp that I would probably lose a finger, or at least part of it, and I am in no hurry to do that. This is for the welt, so I just use the existing pattern, traced a line, and then I offset in, I don't know, somewhere between 3/8 of an inch or a 1/2 inch, thereabout, and I use that to make the welt. Again, you can see my fingers are beside and behind that leading edge of the head knife. I wanted to do a little tooling, and I decided I'm going to do 3 pine trees. This does not have to be exact, and it's not going to be exact. I just got it close enough so I can have a guide. If you're tooling, you always want to put some kind of a backing on your leather so that it doesn't stretch and warp, because it will as you hammer on that front surface. So just a little bit of packing tape is all I need. Distilled water. Do the whole thing so that it stays saturated together. And then this is my bundle of leather tooling tools. I don't remember what they call it, but that's the shape I'm going to use. That's just a metal plate to weight it down as I tap it doesn't move. the way I'm doing this, I'm using the point of the tool, and I'm always pointing it towards the center of the tree. This is a beveler. I started with this one, and I ended up transitioning to a thicker one. The wider the beveler, the smoother your lines will be. So right here, you can see what a beveler does, and then I transitioned to an even wider one. It's probably 3/8 of an inch wide, maybe a 1/2 inch, and it makes a very, very smooth bevel line. This is called a backgrounder, or a shader. And then I used a smaller version of the same thing to do the bottom of the tree down by the trunk. And then this is a modeling tool that I use to round either side of that trunk. And you can use the backside to help take tool marks out. So some of my files corrupted, and I don't have anything of when I did the antiquing. And also now I'm at the point where in the last 5 minutes of the video where there will be no audio because I'm listening to other stuff on YouTube. This is a small beveler that I'm using to knock the corners off in preparation to burnish the edges with tokonol. This has the consistency of Elmer's glue, and it will help lay the fibers down when you burnish so you don't have a fuzzy edge. It's pretty easy to do. You just apply it there and then use a rag or a burnisher, which is just like a wooden stick basically with some slots in it. It needs heat and friction, and when it does that, it will shine up and burnish the edges. Strap for the buckle. Punch the 2 holes. The hole in the front is going to have part of the snap. The hole in the back is going to be a rivet for the buckle. Now it's time to use some contact adhesive to put this thing together. You do not have to use glue for this with it being stitched together, but glue makes it easier. Especially it helps hold things together while you're doing your stitching. This is a water-based contact adhesive instead of solvent-based. I went to water-based a long time ago because with my shop being down in the basement, the solvent stuff is really good at getting me high. And I don't really want to do that. This stuff has to set for a few minutes. And once it's more or less dry to the touch, you can see me checking there. Once it's like that, it is ready to put together. You can see me just lining it up right here. The welt is a little bit bigger than the actual hatchet lines, which is fine because once this is all put together, I'm going to trim off the excess. Hammer it in place, and there we go. Ready for the stitching chisels. So you can see here, I have it hanging off the edge of the cutting board so that this welt will sit flat on the board. And I end up using the 2-prong all the way up there because the curves are too tight to use the big one. The other footage that corrupted was me stitching it. So there's no footage of me doing that. But then once it was stitched together, I trimmed off the excess welt and then prepared it with sanding and more tokonol to finish the edge as well. And we're on the home stretch. You can see it all smoothed out there. I'm using a slightly bigger beveler to knock the mushrooming off of the welt side, the edge, whatever you'd like to call it. Tokonol again, and a good burnish. Test fit, looks good. I use the strap here. Now I punch multiple holes in here with the idea if the strap were to ever stretch, that Brooke could use the additional holes to tighten the strap. And on the other side will be the snap. So you use the snap to take the mask on and off quickly, and the only time you'll ever use the buckle on the back is just to adjust it. These are line 20 snaps. They're the smaller versions. That's a custom snap setter that I got from a buddy a number of years ago. Helps hold everything in place. And that's it. Here's what it looked like before, and here's what it looked like finished. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you'd like to see more footage like this. And I thank you for sticking around for 39 minutes.